My name is Amy Krings. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Michigan. I'm in a joint social work and political science program. And this is a fantastic opportunity for me because oftentimes you get placed on panels where your presentations don't necessarily mesh well or speak to one another. But so far I see a lot of very interesting themes emerging in the presentation so far. And I'm going to really zero in on a specific case. Both of you have laid out sort of these big structural concerns and issues. And so there's not going to be time for me to really dig into how some of the themes that you two have laid out apply in this case, but I would argue they do. And hopefully there'll be time for us to kind of unravel how these presentations speak to each other. So I'm very happy to be here. The dominant research question is both a philosophical question and a pragmatic question. Is there a way that we can support large-scale economic redevelopment in a way that benefits existing residents? Specifically, are there ways that we can reduce environmental and spatial inequalities in the city of Detroit, which is an important question for residents because these types of inequalities often lead to environmental health impacts and health disparities. So briefly, some helpful concepts. I'm going to be talking about this notion of mega projects. In Detroit, we can easily think of, again, the hockey arena. In my case, I'm going to be talking about the new international border crossing. There's a new Meijer grocery store coming, the M1 rail project. But the term that I think is useful to think about is something called a locally undesirable land use. So the notion is that these types of mega projects can, in the abstract, be useful to the region, but harmful to the specific host community. So every region needs a way to get rid of its trash, a way to treat its water, highways. However, while that benefits the aggregate, there are negative externalities passed on most directly to host communities. And the trend is that those types of projects end up in low-income communities that are primarily Black and brown. And it presents an interesting political issue about how, if you're a resident of those host communities, how do you build allies when, in the aggregate, the region is benefiting? It may not be as obvious to develop allies when there's a development that is equally harmful or equally beneficial across the board. And that's how we come up with what are known as sacrifice zones. The notion being, we're going to sacrifice this small area, we're going to put the incinerator there, we're going to put the bridge there, or the wastewater treatment plant. And yes, it might be harmful to this small host community, but in the aggregate, it's good for the whole. We're going to sacrifice them, but hey, that's okay, because it's good for the majority. And so I want to zero in on, people say, well, what is your case a case of? I conceptualize my case as a sacrifice zone. And we're talking about Detroit today, but wherever, maybe not all of us are from Detroit, think about your home community, wherever it is that you're from. Where is it in your home community that the incinerator is placed, the steel mills are placed? Where are the highways placed? Where is the wastewater treatment plant? And think to yourself, okay, that's the type of case I'm talking about today. So you can decide if this makes sense in your case. So just briefly, I'm talking about a policy called the Community Benefits Agreement that is designed, it's intended to make these mega projects, this large-scale economic development, accountable to the host community. So just briefly, the pictures I have here include the expansion of the Marathon plant, a picture of John Hance at the Hance Woodlands, and the same picture that Dr. Polo just promoted of the Illich Empire. In each of these cases, there's been conversation about the benefits that will be distributed broadly or to external capital, but the harm that will be placed on the host communities. And therefore, as I said, there's a strategy to try to make this type of development accountable in the form of a community benefits agreement. The notion of which is it's a legally binding agreement between a private developer or a government body with a host community. And this is important because it helps, again, to historically situate the rise of community benefits agreements. The state is less important as before. Now, oftentimes, the state is removed, and the negotiation takes place directly between a developer and the host community. So how does that work? Clearly, there's going to be power imbalances. So previous literature tends to emphasize power inequality between the developer and the host community. And a lot of previous literature looks at variance on strength of community benefits agreements. And it says, typically, we can almost come up with a formula, depending on the strength, on the disparity between power of the host community and the developer, that can predict how strong of a community benefits agreement we have. Now here's my critique. The vast majority of this literature samples their cases based on neighborhood groups that are in negotiation already with a developer. What happens to the sacrifice zones that can't get the developer to the table in the first place? Okay, so what I'm arguing is we have a sampling problem. We have a truncated sample, as they say. So if we think about all the communities facing a mega project, a locally undesirable land use, some are able to compel a developer to negotiate. One would imagine, in general, those communities are more powerful than those that cannot compel a developer to negotiate. So if we're only studying communities in negotiation, we've left out what I would argue to be the most marginalized. Are you following me? So my case is adding to that literature in that I'm zeroing in on a community that was unable to get to the negotiation table. And I'm going to look at the power dynamics that prevented that. So I'm not even dealing with the developer. I'm talking about just to get to the negotiation table. And so specifically, my dissertation broadly looks at why a community would pursue a CBA rather than pursuing a cooperative strategy, or rather than saying, not in my backyard, period. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm really going to hone in today on how did power dynamics influence the Southwest Detroit Community Benefits campaign. And I don't think there'll be time, but if there were more time, I would talk about what does that mean pragmatically to those of us in the room and activists and residents about keeping development accountable. How I'm going to answer this question, I'm drawing from political ethnographic research over the past 3 years, where I've been following the Southwest Detroit Community Benefits campaign, as well as in-depth interviews, as well as going into archives and media content. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into great detail about the bridge proposal. I have the impression that this room is pretty familiar with Detroit politics, so hopefully we all know there's a plan to build a new international border crossing that would land in the community of Delray, which is located in Southwest Detroit. If you look at this proposed map, here's the existing Ambassador Bridge, here's Canada, here's Detroit. The plan is that 2 miles south of the existing bridge crossing, there would be a new border crossing. And then this very pretty picture depicts Delray. This is an overhead picture. Now, remember the term sacrifice zone. If the color was a little bit better in this image, we could see that Canada would be green, Zug Island would be pitch black, and most of Delray would be brown. This is the wastewater treatment plant. So if you're in Delray, there's a scent that is given off associated with the wastewater treatment plant. There are also scents given off from the steel mill, and there are a number of Superfund sites scattered throughout Delray, heavy trucking. As you can see, Interstate 75 literally blocks off Delray from the rest of the city. So it's geographically, spatially, politically, racially, in terms of class, marginalized from the rest of the community of Delray. However, there are still over 3,000 people that live in Delray. Very briefly, scenes from Delray. I want to just juxtapose both the arson and scrapping that's happening there rapidly with people that are really investing in their homes. You can see there's flowers here. Like, there definitely are people that still very much care about their neighborhood and are doing it themselves. This picture shows occupied homes within blocks of the Zug Island steel mill. Okay, brief reminder. To get a bill passed, you have to get a bill on the table. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. We have to go through the voting and all that, but bills are frequently held in committee. In this instance, this bill is very bored because he wants to get voted on, and he is being ignored. And the bottom line is, you can kill a bill by never voting on it, by never bringing it into up for a vote. And so just remember that. So what complicates the CBA process? Okay, I'm going to present in a very short period of time 3 broad categories, and I'm going to say how they played out in the Delray case. First, there are groups that will unconditionally oppose the development. Those groups may find it in their political interest to say, we should not have this new crossing, we should not have this new development. And one reason we should not have it is connected to a community benefits agreement. And community benefits agreements are bad news. In the Delray case, there's, without question, the largest opposition to the new crossing is the owners of the existing bridge crossing, the Maroon family. I'm talking to you all like we're family, like we already know these political developments. So I hope that's true, and ask me later if I'm wrong. As we all know, the Maroons, they don't want the competition. They want to protect their monopoly. So they've used as many frames and tactics as they can to delay the new bridge. One of them has been to say, look, legislators, if you vote for this new bridge, you're going to be giving more money to Detroit. And we know you don't want that. So one thing they did is the statewide ballot initiative. And one of the mailings that was sent across the state said, more of your money for Detroit. Don't let politicians give away more projects and special giveaways for the new bridge. And this picture is in Delray. And the notion was, look, a vote for the new bridge is a vote for corruption, pork projects. Of course, this is all, I think, playing on racial animus and trying to convince people this new bridge is a bad idea. So again, groups that unconditionally oppose the new development as a tactic or as a frame could be this new development is bad because of the CPA. A second set of groups that can make it hard to pursue a CBA are groups that unconditionally support the new development. So how that played out in the Delray case is there were groups that said, look Delray, we're going to take care of you, but you need to be quiet right now. Because when you talk about a CBA, you're making things messy for us. So let's get this new development passed. We're going to get the bridge bill passed. Then later we're going to come back and give you your benefits. Oh, and by the way, this bridge is going to be good for you anyway, so just pipe down, would you? So the notion was, it's in Delray's interest to say, look, we want a CBA, and we want it voted on with the bridge, because we have leverage now. We will not have leverage later. If you're going to vote on a new bridge bill, it needs to include a guarantee of community benefits agreements. But again, the coalition of groups that wanted the bridge no matter what, they didn't necessarily have a problem with Delray. They weren't trying to kill the people of Delray, but they have an economic interest to limit as much controversy as they can. And similarly, there are groups that unconditionally want development in Detroit. So recently we saw an article saying arguing that community benefits agreements are a bad idea because they're like a shakedown tax. Okay, third, there are groups that might like the idea of local benefits, but might say, you know what, they shouldn't go to the host community, they should go to us instead. We're actually a more appropriate recipient of those investments. In Detroit, as we've talked about the notion of the Detroit future city, and the idea being that we have these limited resources, so we're going to target them in certain neighborhoods, and other neighborhoods are going to be crossed off the list. Delray is one of those neighborhoods that has a giant X on it. So the city says, yes, we have some leverage. The state needs to buy our publicly owned land. We like the idea of local benefits. We agree with that part, but we don't want them going to Delray. We want them going to our target investment neighborhoods, such as Midtown, where we are, such as Corktown, such as downtown. So yeah, bring us those community benefits that you're talking about, but we're not worried about new parks or new infrastructure or creating green buffers in Delray. We want that over here. Okay, so in conclusion, I have, my research is a case of one. I don't know, I have to be clear, I don't know if these power dynamics apply generally. Having said that, I think I'm posing some power dynamics that I believe are probably viewed in other CPA cases. And I think that's important because let's say you all are in a community group that is considering pursuing a CPA. I would say to you, before you do any campaign, you look at the politics, you think about who are your allies, who's your opposition, and it would be limited to think only about what is the power we have to influence the developer. There are other groups that are going to make your campaign complicated, not necessarily because they have an issue with you, but their own self-interest can make it difficult for them to support you. So you want to think about what kinds of power and leverage and relationships you have with those groups too. And that matters because it helps to unveil, you said, how does the market create losers? I think this case helps unveil how market, social, political forces recreate environmental injustices and how they recreate sacrifice zones. So, so that is all, and if we have time, I'm happy to take questions.